Welcome one, welcome all, and we have a great NASCAR race ahead of us today. And after yesterday's rain out, which it was actually just starting to get good at that point, Stats, we are in Dover. The one thing I can hope for is that there's no rain and that these long runs can actually develop. It was one of the first times, Stats, because I always love a short race and stuff, but I was like, man, these stages are too short. You didn't get a chance to see any late runs. You kind of saw a little bit of falling back, but then we finally got to the last stage. And we've started to see Eric Almirola finally kind of move through. And I thought he was going to catch Zilish there in that last stage as well. But the rain did not give us a chance to see that. Hopefully, no trouble today. Stats, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Thank you. I was all in Truex, and he was kind of just gradually moving up. So I needed that to go a little bit longer. And see, I think he finished 19th, started I don't know, I forget what it was, 31st, something like that. So just need him to move up a little bit longer. I was right there. Actually, slight profit with, which is always tough to do when you put 150 lineups in and you don't, and the highest lineup was 10th. So we'll see how it goes today. This is an interesting one. Yeah, we had the rain. Obviously, a lot of rain this weekend. I mean, if you play MLB, you know what it's been like in the Northeast. Baltimore games, New York games, Philly, Washington, those games are constantly on the radar, so to speak, no pun intended, for rain delays. And we had that in NASCAR here this weekend. So we had no qualifying for this race. We had no practice for this race. So just adds another element here where we've got a whole lot of questions. Hopefully we've got some answers for you guys, and we'll find out the test results at 2:00 and change today. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, if you want to we'll do a little overview or preview of this race, this track. Dover is a steep track. It's a 1 mile, and it's steep, which is unusual for the 1 mile track. So it really doesn't correlate well with other mile tracks. I think if you're looking at tracks to comp, Kansas really works well as a comp for Dover. And quite frankly, without practice, without qualifying, we really only have, history at this track to look at. And like I said, maybe some comp tracks. You're going to want to look at some of the steep tracks. And they're in a different package. They're in the intermediate package, I believe, this week, not the short track. Also, we've got a new tire compound. So that just adds another element of we don't know what to expect with the new tires. We've had issues here in the past with tire wear. So Denny has always been one of the better drivers. He's always really good at saving tires. He's been one of the better drivers here. We've got quite a few of the very expensive drivers who are really, really good here. And this track has historically kind of been a stars and scrubs track. And I think that's how a lot of lineups are going to kind of play out, or at least that's how a lot of lineups are going to be built this week. So we will we'll dive in. We'll see if we can dissect it for you guys.
My favorite thing, Stats, the first thing that I look up was, the tire for Dover, right? And it says Dover NASCAR brings Goodyear brings an untested tire to Dover here. So that's going to be a lot of fun, Stats. I think practice would have been very beneficial yesterday, especially, but the rain did not permit. That's why we have so many amazing starting spots, though. It was funny. I saw the Shane Van Gisbergen tweet too. It's like the highest qualifying position that he's going to have on an oval. He's starting sixth. A guy who's just been an absolute force on the road courses. I imagine that he is going to be someone who's just going to be really interesting to watch for the rest of the season too. Because I think that there's a decent chance he can get through round one, and I know that would tilt a bunch of people if he was able to get through round one of the playoffs. But I know that he is just getting better and better at the ovals, but obviously we're not going to be playing him this week. But you're going to have a lot of uncertainties. You have just a mixed up grid, a billion good plays. I mean, that's the number one thing that I can say about this is that you're going to have an amazing lineup no matter what it feels. And if you want to make one pivot away from that, that's fine. The question is, do you trust, with everything going on around it, is like Denny Hamlin, right? 23-11, the whole mess that is between him and NASCAR at this point. But also, this is a track that he just dominates at. And when we look at where I think he's won here 7 times. That's just incredible. Is he your top stud today? Because I know that there's a million studs that we can talk about. I mean, if you just wanted to look at place differential, I mean, Blaney and Larson pop off the page and stuff. But is Hamlin the number one guy here today where dominator points matter so much?
I don't know. I don't know yet, man. I'm having a hard time kind of distinguishing between all of them. So and I'll be making the lineups after this, but it's close. I mean, you've got Denny, as you mentioned, has been just phenomenal here at this track, but Larson has been pretty damn good on steep tracks. Maybe not quite as good at Dover, although he's had some pretty strong finishes here at Dover as well. And then you got the guy who's on the pole in Chase Elliott, who has been this was probably one of his best tracks, if not his best tracks, and should lead a lot of laps, should get out to the front. Probably should mention how they qualified, right? I think you kind of alluded to, like SVG up there, I think starting sixth. It was a good chunk of it was based on the on last week's race. I don't know if it was the last 2 weeks, but so that's how SVG got up there, qualifying so high, because of course he did really well, winning both of those races on the both of those road races. So yeah, it's a little unusual qualifying, but we've got Chase Elliott, who does qualify. He may have qualified on the pole regardless, with how good he's been here. So I don't know yet who's going to be. I think it's going to be very close, but I don't have a pick to of these top guys where I'm necessarily advocating for an all-in. I think it's going to have to be a little bit spread out. We've got, and then with a Larson, I didn't even mention Blaney, who has been one of the better. I think he's had really good long run speed all season, and at a track here in Dover that we don't necessarily expect a lot of cautions, I think this could be a situation where we do see Blaney really, who starts 31st, be able to work his way past a lot of cars and get himself into contention as well. So you've got Larson and Blaney with the really strong PD plays, starting 25th and 31st respectively. And then you've got Elliott, who's on the pole. You've got Christopher Bell, who starts third, who has been pretty good here at Dover. Not his last time out, but he's had some decent success with a fourth and a sixth place finish. And at Kansas has had really good success. So I wouldn't necessarily want to throw him out. And then you've got William Byron, who on the steep package or on the steep tracks has a pretty good driver rating, one of the best, I think third best so far in this field, and decent results here at Dover as well. Last year not so good with a 33rd, but he's had 3 fourth place finishes over the last 5 years, and has had some decent success. Had a second place at Kansas 2 trips ago to Kansas. So we've got some contenders, I think, who can perform well here, and it's going to be a combination of these guys. We're going to have to take some of these guys as place differential plays, even though Larson, it's a place differential play. There's no reason Larson can't eventually get up here and get us some lead laps as well, get us some dom points. So I think it's really interesting with the 10K and above drivers. I don't think any of them are necessarily ones that you want to eliminate from your 150 builds. If we're a little bit more narrow, 20 max, 3 maxes, things like that, we're going to have to make some decisions. But I think you're going to have to take, and we didn't mention Denny, or I didn't mention Denny here. The only problem with Denny is that start position is like right in between. Now, does he get up front? He's a guy who can be very patient, may not necessarily jump out and get us a lot of lead laps. He'll try to win this race late. So I could see Denny at that 13th starter position, where he doesn't have as much of the upside from place differential as a Larson or a Blaney, and then isn't starting so close to the front where he's almost guaranteed here to get us some dom points, maybe like a Chase Elliott and perhaps a Bell or Byron. So interesting spot for Denny, but I think a strong finish from him with some dom points perhaps gets him into the winner. So this one is, I think we can make a case, I think, for all of these guys over 10K. Very, very difficult to toss any of them out.
So interesting point you made with Denny, right? And I kind of want to go through this because I think it's very important. Right, he won his last race June 8th, right? Got first place, 5 laps led, right? There's a theme here too. All right, the race before that he wins Goodyear 400, wins that race, 10 laps led. Those produced, I know he started inside the top 5 on both of those, but those produced 52 and 58 fantasy points. Obviously, a lot more to go around here at Dover than most, but you also have to look at it this way. He also won the Cookout 400, right? 274 laps. So there has been instances where Denny has won a race and hasn't even come close to being in the optimal, right? In terms of there was other studs who outscored him with, place differential or their own laps led, their own Dominator points. It's like, which Denny do we see today, right? I look at it where I think he wins the race. Like I hear what you're saying about Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, William Byron. And for someone who's making one lineup today, stats, the only 3 I really want to trust, especially on a slate where we didn't have qualifying, we didn't have practice, we didn't have anything that could make you confident in any of these guys other than one thing, track history, right? That's the one thing that we can lean in on. We've raced over the last 5 years. Like, we know exactly where these cars can kind of end up, right? Where these drivers do well here, save tires, make long runs, right? I think that's the big thing with Blaney too, where he's been incredible all season, especially at the start of the season. But if he doesn't have those engine blowups, he could have 2 more wins to his name almost, it feels. But I look at it this way, where if I'm building one lineup, I'm building even like just a few, Larson, Hamlin, and Blaney, but they're also the 3 most expensive. I'm going to ask you this: what is Chase Elliott owned today? And I do you really want to trust a Chase Elliott on a poll where if he is 30%, I don't know if he'll get that high. The Sabre has him at 58, which is ridiculous.
No. Yeah, I think 30 is about right.
And just sometimes you just want to lean into it. But like in a 20 max, I'm not playing Chase Elliott today, right? I just don't think I am. And I understand that the clean air, right? That's the big thing. If you get clean air, you're going to lead stage 1. That's just the reality of it. At least the first 40, 50 laps, especially. But we don't know how these cars are going to react in this specific, weekend. And this specific race, I don't know if I can trust any of these guys starting inside the top 5. I'd rather take the PD and run. There's nothing to say that Larson and Blaney can't dominate, even by the second stage, right? Because, if you save enough tire, passing's not going to be the greatest thing in the world, but, it just matters about clean air for the lead. But, yeah, I think I would just rather lay my money out on the first 3 guys, Larson, Hamlin, Blaney. I would rank them even. I'm going to trust Hamlin today's stats. It's just I didn't want to, but Hamlin, Blaney, then Larson. But to me, that's like 1A, 1B, 1C. And then the next tier would be, tied for 4th, right? It would be I think it would be Byron or Bell. And I honestly don't know. Maybe make the case for Chastain, but I had a debate earlier today, just making the lineup and stuff, talking to a buddy. It's 9.5 for Chastain. It feels like we were just paying $8K for him a few weeks ago. I don't know. It just feels like I'm paying a very high tag for a guy like Chastain. So we talked about it coming into the show, stars and scrubs. And it very much feels that way, stats. If I go 2 studs here, especially above 10.5K or above 10K, especially, I don't have to fiddle with an 8.8K Bowman, a 9.5K Chastain. That's not even to mention, Briscoe, Logano, Reddick, Elliott, Bell, and Byron. Then you don't have an elite play until you get to Carson Hocevar at 7,700, because everyone else starts in between or worse or better than 19th. And if you keep on going down stats, then it's Ricky Stenhouse who's the next guy who starts 30th and back. Eric Jones starts 27th, which is okay. Keep going down. Zane Smith then becomes the best play. After you get through this range of studs, it almost feels like we don't have a mid-range. And that's what's kind of keeping me at the very high end of the studs, because I don't feel the need to dip from Blaney to Chastain to save 1,400, right? Or to save 1,200, because that 1,200 does not get me anything today. And I think that's really important to go. Is just the mid-range is almost non-existent, right?
I agree, right? But all right, I'm going to just throw and see if I could just confuse you some more.
I love it.
Or at least get you thinking, questioning yourself. How about that?
I like it.
Just guys, right? So one, we know Hendrick's history here has been really good, right? So that's a notch for Chase Elliott, obviously Larson, and then Byron. Now, when you look at guys, the laps led here, Byron has led in the next gen the most laps of any driver here at Dover. And then you mentioned Chastain. Chastain has led the third most behind Denny. So I think Chastain is interesting for the exact reasons that you actually stated, where I think a lot of people will kind of get off of a Chastain because of the fact that they could use some of these more expensive drivers, or they want, they kind of want to get to these more expensive drivers. When Chastain starting 19th with the success he's had here could be interesting and maybe a little under owned because of what you said, where you don't necessarily have to get down to a Chastain and save that salary to use him. So perhaps, if he has a strong performance, and he has been, like I said, he's been pretty good now, has not been good on these steep tracks overall, but has the second best driver rating at Dover in the next gen cars. So I think Chastain could be very, very sneaky here and perhaps give us a really strong finish and kind of throw a monkey wrench into some of these more common builds. Although, it's not like he's going to be unowned, but I think it changes. It could be a way that you want to play this a little differently and perhaps use a Chastain in your lineup and then try to figure, it's really tough to punt or, to not play a Larson or a Blaney. I just think they're in a really strong spot, but perhaps you go with a Larson, Blaney, and then Chastain, and then skip over all these guys starting up front. And I don't know if that's necessarily the smartest idea. We've typically had here at least one driver that has started in the top 10. Yeah. It has not historically been a great place differential track, but then again, we've qualified differently, right? So I think that changes here today. So it could be just a way we make a little bit of a different types of lineups, and perhaps maybe some of these guys, the Elliots, Byron and Bell, some of the chalkier or the better drivers who are starting up at the front. We haven't even talked about Reddick, who's up there as well. Perhaps it's someone different up there who leads early. I don't know. But I just think Chastain, I think making a lineup with Chastain actually maybe makes it a little bit more unique if you're looking to get off of what everyone else is going to be doing, which is probably 3 studs in their lineup and possibly 3 guys over 10K.
Yeah, I didn't expect him to have the second best driver rating at Dover. That is kind of crazy to me. And you do look at the stats too: 3rd, 2nd, 12th over the last 3 years here. Leading the third most laps. I think, what was it, 3 years ago, Byron led like 193 laps or something. Really, I think if you had to put your money in, it would be a JGR or Hendricks win. That's not going off the wall here at all. But,
the 2 favorites, yeah.
And then he would be the Trackhouse guy. Like, if you were to put money on someone, it's like outside of them, I'm not going to trust Reddick. I just don't think I can do it. But the Byron note was interesting because I already kind of liked him, right? If you really look at it too, over the last 3 years stats, the pole hasn't been dominant here, which is kind of crazy to me, right? I think that's when we look at short tracks like this, where it's not a short track, right, but it's a mile long, in terms of down points, it's going to be is it 400 laps today?
400,
right?
yeah.
So it's 400 laps, and that's just so many down points, right? But it's do you have the data on how often pole has been optimal at this track over the last 4 years? Has it been optimal once?
It hasn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that Chase Elliott and Clean Air, and obviously there's been a lot of talk about it, but it's this seems like a track, if anything, you're right, Blaney and Larson, will they be able to kind of get up there and dom, or are we? If I play them both, am I going to be bitching about the fact that they can't pass? And I just know I can already see myself doing that stats. It is going to be 4:30. It's going to be about 2 hours into the race. Stage 2 is halfway through, and I'm just going to be man, Larson's 17th and Blaney's 16th right now. This is terrible. They can't make a pass. Cody Ware, they can't pass Cody Ware and laugh him. This is terrible. I can already see myself saying that, but is a reason, and this could be a complete reason too. It's because we were going to see some passes, especially for the lead in that Xfinity series after about 50 laps. Like I think the long run was especially, but when you start to kind of lap these cars, the clean air kind of like dissipates a little bit. Then it's all about the tire wear. And do you get 50 laps of Chase Elliott and then, one pit stop later, it could be ruined, or maybe the long run, maybe someone saves tires a little bit better and all of a sudden they pass them. Like, is the reason why the pole has not been optimal, has that been more of just the track like layout? Is it more beneficial to see, passes for the lead here than other tracks maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whose story. Maybe it has something to do with, I think Kyle Busch has been on the pole the last 2 years. I think he was going for his third year in a row, which he didn't have a chance to do it. Perhaps that is the issue. Although he's had a very good driver rating here as well, Kyle Busch. So I'm not 100% sure. He just hasn't. Let's see what his laps led here. I mean, he's had a decent amount of laps led. He's the fourth or fifth, fourth most laps led here in next gen. So he's led the laps. I just guess it just hasn't been just not enough to get him into the optimal. Although, wait, hold on. No, he was in the optimal, I think, a couple of years ago. But yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't. Oh no, that was in 2022 when he was not in when he started 10th. So that would make sense. I knew it was like none of the pole sitters here have. As a matter of fact, nobody on the front row has made it into the optimal lineup. I think, yeah, Blaney was in 2023, started third, finished third, and actually did not lead any laps, but had 29 fastest laps and wasn't in the optimal. So actually, no, he wasn't in the optimal. He was just in the. I don't think he used him in to win. So yeah, it's. This historically has been a track where not necessarily starting up at the front has worked out. So I think you can make it. I'm going back to, if I'm playing a single entry and I want to differentiate myself here, I don't know. I'm like convincing myself that Ross Chastain is the play to differentiate yourself. He's kind of like, 19th. I think that's pretty decent place differential with a lot of success. I know it's Trackhouse. Yeah, I just feel like you got to do something different in a large GPP with a single bullet, and maybe who knows, maybe punting a lot of these guys on the front or up at the front. Maybe that's going to work out if we get someone, if we get a Denny. Maybe you play Denny in there, and maybe Denny gets up to the lead, fairly quickly, starting in the 13th spot. He's the one who leads a lot of the early laps. With Chastain coming in, I don't know. The thing to me, there's a lot of confusion here this week because we don't have as much information, and I think because of that, and with the new tire situation that they have coming in, I think you maybe want to play it a little, get a little different here, because everyone's looking at the same info. Everyone's just looking at previous history. Who knows? It's going to be who shows up to the track here with the right setup. Most of these guys, they tinker all weekend after they practice. And qualifying, no one's going to have a chance to do that. It's going to be who adjusts on the fly the quickest, and perhaps we're going to see a very unusual race. Maybe the tire situation just becomes crazy, and it throws, it just throws a monkey wrench into the whole race, and we get a lot of, we get one of those where next week we're talking about, what a mess this race was, and the tire wear and who was blowing, how many guys blew tires. You don't know. I just think, if I'm playing a single entry in a large GPP, I got to get different. And it's not necessarily, in this case, maybe not necessarily looking at different as far as I want to find a bunch of 10%, potentially 10% owned drivers. Maybe I just want to play the structure a little bit different. And maybe I won't play a stars and scrubs. I mean, the stars and scrubs on paper looks absolutely the way to go. I'm just saying maybe we play a little game theory and change it up a little bit for a single entry into a big GPP.
So, Stats, have you heard anything about a competition caution this week with the new tire compound? Is there a chance of that?
I have not heard that.
Do you think we would know after what you said? They're going to do some testing here at 2:00?
Who's going to do testing? They're going to test.
Is that what you said, or you were just talking about the race? Okay.
No, I said our test. Yeah, our test. The answers to the test will be at 2, or a little after 2, I guess. When
I wonder if there's going to be a competition caution, because I look at that stats, that would greatly benefit the guys like Hamlin or, maybe not, because I think they would kind of get it done longer, but especially like Blaney, Larson, those guys starting in the back, because then if you're able to make a couple passes, immediately reset, but then it would hurt a guy like Chase Elliott. I don't think there is going to be one. I haven't seen anything about that. I didn't hear
it. No.
Yeah, it's just like I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because, like, we have seen NASCAR just do competition cautions, in the past. This is a new tire compound. I just didn't know if you saw anything about that, but it doesn't look like we got that today. Which I see this. Kyle Busch talked about the new tire. I do want to listen to that after the show. But it should be a good time. Stats. We talked about the studs forever. I'm going to ask you one last question about the studs, though. How many drivers in a lineup today? How many drivers are inside the top 10 in the winner? What do you think?
How many drivers starting inside the top 10? I'm going to say one.
One. I was kind of thinking the same thing, Stats. I think if you were to build out a lineup today, is 0 to 1. So someone asked about groups. I don't do groups in NASCAR anymore. I kind of let the diversification kind of take over itself, especially with the Saber Sims new update. I think that Portfolio Plus thing is really good. I think it's for someone who, if you haven't used the Portfolio Plus with Saber's plan, I think that's just something that they just kind of came out with over the last week. It really kind of flatlines your exposures to kind of the field. The problem with that with NASCAR is the ownerships have to be accurate, and it was like 46% off on Taylor Gray yesterday. So I didn't want to use it yesterday, so I didn't use it yesterday. But for like WNBA and stuff, like kind of getting these flatter exposures. And,
I haven't used it. Explain that to me. I haven't used it yet.
So from what I'd use it for a WNBA, it's better on larger slates. I think for small slates, like a 2-gamer and stuff, like in WNBA, you can get buried because there have been times where like it's really hard not to hit the optimal, or for a player not to hit the optimal, but it really kind of flatlines at exposure. So what I kind of found out, Stats, when I did it is like, let's say I really loved Caitlin Clark coming into a slate. Let's change it from WNBA. Let's say I really liked Tarek Skubal for a slate, right? Or Chase Burns, because that's what an MLB slate I played. I was like expecting them to just jam in there. And it turns out I kind of had just above the field on them, but it really kind of mixed in several other pitchers where I wasn't expecting to kind of get into like, I was kind of expecting them to be very flurried in, right? With Skubal and Burns, because I had them projected so high because I wanted to bump them up. And what I kind of found out with that Portfolio Plus is when I just did ROI and projected score, it was very high on those two. It was like, oh yeah, those are the two best plays. And then when I flipped at the Portfolio Plus, like, you know what, you're going to need some Rodon, you're going to need some of Wu, you're going to need some of Logan Gilbert or whatever. And sure enough, I don't think Burns was optimal. I don't think Skubal was even close. And that ended up being like a huge difference. Is like, hey, if you're going to do large field tournaments, don't just commit to one path, right? And in Portfolio Plus, like, I think it does a great job kind of summarizing that. I'm curious to see how it'll perform for NFL and NBA, obviously, but I did give it a go a few times in MLB, and the way it kind of flattens it, especially in WNBA, is like, oh, these are lineups I wouldn't have had if I did ROI, right? That's just the reality of it. So, not to get off on too much of a tangent.
Yeah, I'm gonna mess around with it. Yeah. They're always updating, which is good.
Yes, I think it's a really good thing if the ownerships, especially, are accurate. And I don't think Chase Elliott's going to come in at 60%.
No, well, with that, because obviously I use Saber as well, and I look at, but I change the ownerships to what, kind of to where I think it's going to be. So don't be afraid to change the ownership.
We'll have to talk about that one. If you're changing it, are you making field lineups?
What do you mean field lineups?
So they do their own field lineups, right? Based on the ownership. So yeah, if you're changing it and just changing the number, it actually does nothing to the system.
No, that does nothing. I change it because I change my ownership because I know what ownership I want, and then I do min max.
Oh yeah,
So I do. So it is important for me. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the Sims. I was like, yeah, I used to do.
Oh no, yeah, not the Sims.
Yeah. No. Yeah, but no, yeah, getting your own minimax. That's exactly what I was doing for Xfinity race yesterday too. Is like when I was getting 45% Taylor Gray despite nuking his projection down, even though I wanted a little bit, but I didn't want 45%. And like getting an idea of where I wanted to be on most guys, and with Truex and with Even like a guy like Dean Thompson, who I was high on, it wasn't like pushing him way high up because they had him at lower ownership, right? Like it wasn't like, oh, you're going to play 50% of a 5% guy. It's like, no, we're going to get you around like 15, 20%. So that's kind of like a way to look at it. If I had to make a group though, it would not just kind of get around it. I would rather have 0 to 2 at most inside the top 10. I would probably feel most comfortable at 1 when I'm building a single entry lineup. I think 0 is in play. Not that I would really go out of my way to do it, but if I think Hamlin wins the race, I think you can go 0. If you think Byron, Bell, or Elliott win this race, hell, even throw in Briscoe, then yeah, I think you have to have one of those guys if you think they're going to win.
Yeah, I don't do the groups nearly as much as I used to. Obviously, at the super speedways, you kind of wanted, I don't even know if I do use groups there, but a lot of them you're just kind of Xing out the top, 15 maybe spots typically. But yeah, if you're you could, I guess you could in the top 10, maybe max it out at 2, but I don't know. You're just not going to get enough. I don't think you're going to get enough. If you're playing 150, let's say, I don't think you're going to have enough to make a difference of 3 drivers in the top 10. And quite frankly, when I'm playing 150, I want to get a few of those in there anyway, because I want, I'm looking for, those maybe lineups that are going to be a little bit different than other people. So I'm more focused on who I want to X out and not use, and then getting diverse. So I don't really use the groups all that often anymore. I used to a little bit more. And sometimes you're in a situation too where it's like, the front row, I don't want to play both drivers on the front row. It's like one of these guys is going to be optimal, definitely not the other. In that case, then it's one of those, I only want one of these two in my lineup. But I don't really see it this week where I necessarily need to make a group.
Yeah, and that's the way you kind of like phrase it there too. Like, you don't really ever feel the need to make groups as much anymore. But if you were to do a 20 max, maybe you could, really kind of commit, because in 20 max, you're always a huge component of it too. It's like commit to a path, right? Because it's not like you can cover every base. But if you're doing 20 max and you're okay locking one driver, maybe 2 in a 20 max, right? Because you're just wanting to find the sweet spot on the bat, basically, right? You're just swinging it, and yeah, I think in 20 max, I think rules were more acceptable, and even a 3 entry max too, you could do it where it's like, yeah, I'm going to commit to a route that I like, and that's the route that I'm going to kind of try and hit with. All right, stats, mid-range time. Look, this mid-range is not great today. All right, we're not going to gloss over that, but I will have stats too. Is grade us his top 3 plays in between 6.5K. So Shane Van Gisbergen all the way up to Alex Bowman at 8,800. Who are your top 3 mid-range plays today, stats?
Let's look. I mean, I actually wanted to hear what you had to say about Hocevar, right? So Hocevar's the obvious guy here. I think he may be the highest owned driver. I don't know where Sabres got it at. Sabres got 58 on Elliott. Oh, they actually have him at 40. Yeah, they got him at 48. Hocevar. I think Hocevar winds up being the highest.
40. Okay.
Yeah, they got him at 46. I think he's going to be even more than that. So I think he gets to 50 plus. He starts 33rd. The thing with Hocevar has not really. I mean, he only had the one race here. One race ever, and it was a 22nd finish. If you look at Kansas, 26th, 32nd, and 24. Can we make the case to fade Hocevar with very small sample size? But, I think a lot of people are going to be on him at this price tag starting 33rd. I don't know. I don't think he's a lock, let's say, to get into the optimal lineup, but clearly is going to be the highest owned in this group for sure, and possibly in the entire slate. So I'm just curious what you think on Hocevar.
So last week, maybe one of the best drives you'll see of the season. I mean, I don't think enough people realize what happened there is that car was so terrible, and he was a lap down, and that thing, he just had no pace, no nothing. Fluked into a couple cautions that went his way, and was sitting there top 4, with like 5 to go, and he was going to get a top 10 finish when he looked completely dead in the water. I don't think enough people realize that until he got dumped stats by Josh Berry. You know what pissed me off too? I don't usually check the leaderboard late in a race. I was second place with the host of our team. I had Busher in it, but like I think I was looking at I had a lot of host of our teams up there, and I was like, if he doesn't get dumped, I might have had a shout, because it kind of ended up at a race where I was like, kind of did really well. I was second there with like 5 to go, but he got straight dumped by Berry, right? I just kind of want to put this in perspective. Hocevar gets dumped by Berry, right? Hocevar crashes last week, 32nd, 35th. All right, you go back and the week before 10th, 18th, then in Mexico, also got into some incidents, wrecked Ricky Stenhouse. The guy is just so damn good. And if you just talk about talent and talent alone, it would not shock me to see him inside the top 10 today. And you're talking about a driver where even if he was starting 20th stats, I would have a lot of interest in. And I know he's going to be very high owned. And I know what you're saying. He only has one race here. I just think he's just a race car driver. And that's the highest compliment you can give, is I think he might be one of the best drivers on the entire in NASCAR. And if he avoids the wreck, and this has been his issue, right? He always gets mixed up in this stuff, but that's going to happen when you have as much talent as anyone here. And I really want to buy in on Hocevar. I think straight up he is, and you want a really bold play, or a bold opinion. Straight up, I would be entertained if you were to offer me straight up versus him and Larson today on fantasy points. I'll say I know that's bold, but it would require Larson to not get the lead. But I do think that highly of Hocevar. The reason why his DK log can look so bad is because of the wrecks, but that's a gamble I'm willing to make, especially when you have 100K to first or whatever, and upside's the only thing that matters. Who cares if he gets me minus 12 in a lineup, right? Like, or in this case, he could probably get 6 because he could wreck out and still finish positive. Mm-hmm. But look, I'm a chalk donkey for that one.
What number? I mean, if you had to bet straight up fantasy points, Larson against Hocevar, I mean, what kind of odds are you putting on that?
If you gave me plus, I like to speak in hyperboles. You know that. I would probably not even on,
because even money, I'll have to make that bet with you right now.
I was thinking, if you gave me plus 200, I could be entertained. What they would have.
I think that's actually a fair. I think that's a fair line.
And the thing is that you're banking on not many Dom points for a Kyle Larson.
Yes.
Hocevar has also been one to be like, I'm going to go completely against the grain for strategy. Like, I'm going to pit first and I'm going to get the caution, or I'm going to pit late and everyone's going to have to, bow down to me, and I'll be first place, and everyone's going to have 15 laps in their tires, and they're going to be wondering, do we pit or not? And I think it would just depend on Larson, Dom points, because I think top 10 is very much in the cards for Hocevar, which is an incredible score. I just talked myself into going to the mid-range, and I was really kind of committed to stars and scrubs. But yeah, I mean, he's one. All right, stats. Who's 2 and 3?
I mean, how about a guy who I think isn't necessarily being talked about, has really good history at Kansas, pretty good history, or I'd say very good history here, is Alex Bowman. I don't know, did we go up that high to 8,800? But we didn't really talk about Bowman.
We go to Bowman. Bowman was my number 2 as well.
So I think he's the number 2. Again, he's in that tricky start 16th, but historically that's not been a terrible starting position at this track. I think Bowman, you look at his driver rating here in at Dover in the next gen. Was he third for? Third best driver rating here at Dover. It's been really good. Average finish in the next gen has been 7th here. So I think Bowman's kind of a guy who's being overlooked, and I would where do we have him on Sabre? I'm hoping they have him sub 20.
So this is a really interesting one, because I think on a blank sheet of paper, if you were to just say Bowman's 8,800 starting 16th, you would think fairly low owned, right? But you go into that range, and let's say you built out a lineup with Blaney, with Hocevar, with Noah Gragson. You kind of land into a no man's land, right? I think you kind of get into this range where if you're below Ross, Bowman's the best click, and it's an uncomfortable click for me. I think he's a good play for that reason, stats, but it's like uncomfortable for the fact that, is this really the best I can do? Is what I ask myself when I click Alex Bowman's name. Is this really what I want? Is this really what I want to do with myself? Is play Alex Bowman, starting 16th? But you're right, he has been pretty good at Dover. I think he comes in fairly higher if I own because of the fact that there isn't a whole lot of other choices, and it wouldn't shock me if he got to 20% purely because when I just built out a lineup, guess who fits that?
There you go.
And you're just kind of like, I mean, it is what it is, right? If you're playing Hocevar too, you kind of get into that. You have to almost have another mid-range piece unless you get up to Chastain. So, yeah, I think Chastain and Bowman both come in higher owned because of that, because they are like the only guys starting, 15th or worse inside that tricky range all the way down until you get to Hocevar 7,700. In between Busher at 8K and Byron at 10.5, they are the only two guys starting worse than 15. So, yeah, it's tricky.
It is. I mean, let me give you another guy. How about Chris Busher, who you just mentioned?
Yeah.
Again, he's not going to be owned at all. Starts 12th. Again, tricky starting position. Look at his Kansas races. Pretty good. 8th, 11th, and 2nd in his last 3 in Kansas. And then some pretty decent results here at Dover. He's averaged about a 10th place finish in the next gen cars at Dover. Pretty decent driver rating. He's like top 10 in driver rating at in the next gen at Dover. So I think that's another guy who is going to be very, very little ownership on a Busher who has the potential maybe to have a strong race here today.
I am with you, and I think I like that call. I really like that call because you want to hear what my third was?
Go ahead.
Brad Keselowski.
Well, I'm not going to knock you on there because he's right there for me too. Yeah. Go ahead. I want to hear your logic.
It's like just RFK in general. Like I just kind of look at what's a play today that can kind of be a little bit weird, but a team that has had speed, right? Especially at these like intermediate, like where you mentioned Kansas stuff. It's like Keselowski over the past 2 months has had speed, and he's been in some unfortunate situations. You forget about him on the road courses. He's not a big fan of road courses. No. Over the past, 3 of the last 5 races, you really haven't heard from Brad Keselowski. But I was looking at this like potentially being a spot where if you did want to get like a little bit different, it's not like he's great at Dover, like, right? I know that, like, I know coming into that, but also it's like not many times is he like 7,600 in a dead range where I'm like, man, do I really want to go him? But the 8th in 2023, I think is his best result in the next gen car, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's been kind of mild for the most part. But when you look at what he has done, right, I don't like to include like Atlanta and stuff, but he's had like a top 10 car in terms of pace. And, 2nd Atlanta, 9th Pocono, 5th in Charlotte. It's just like a bunch of stuff where even in Kansas, I felt like Keselowski was really fast too. And then he wrecked out, if I'm remembering that correctly. It just feels like a type of track where RFK, and this is why I like your Busher take too, is like, would it shock you if one of their cars were kind of like cooking up there? And the reason why I say it too is that not every play you make has to be optimal. And I kind of been telling myself this in best ball too is, if you're ever like in between on 2 players, just go the player you don't have like a lot of, because it's like how many times in a tournament that you've won, or and especially in golf stats, in baseball too, it's like how many times have you had like a guy who you just had no care for and all of a sudden he's in the winner, right? And not to say I don't have any care for like Keselowski and Busher today, but it's like you're dancing around Hocevar in that range. You might need 2 mid-range drivers to begin with. Those are 2 guys who kind of offer the small blend of PD. I think you still need Dom points from one of them, just a little bit. Not has to be like a ton, but maybe 20 laps led, 20 fastest laps type of combo. I think Keselowski or Busher could kind of fulfill that, and that's why I'd rather them than Cindric, to be honest. I don't know. Like Cindric could have been the default number 3 because he's starting 26th, but I think I'd rather take my chance on these guys starting in the teens, basically.
Yeah, I don't like Cindric nearly as much as I think the market
Yeah.
potentially is going to like him. It's the starting position, 26. Anyone starting like 25th back, obviously people are, and a good driver, people are going to start flocking to him. But not a ton of success at steep tracks, not a ton of success here at Dover. So I could totally, I think his best finish here has been 15th at Dover. So, and two of his, I don't think he finished two of the last three races in Kansas. So, yeah, I could definitely understand that. Cindric not as high for me as I think maybe the market's going to be. I got as you were talking before, you were talking about RFK. We don't talk about stacking much, but this might be an interesting race to do that with a team because we have so many unknowns. So if one team comes in here and just nails the setup, it could be a team type of thing where they, maybe it's RFK where they just somehow they come in here, they have the right car set up, whoever it may be. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to, maybe stack 2 or 3 drivers from the same team in some of your lineups, just on the chance that maybe with a lot of unknowns, they just get it right, they nail it, and dominate this race. I think it's a possibility.
Yeah, I am with you there. I kind of like that idea, especially when we didn't have like practice and stuff. There's like a lot of unknowns there, and if one team does nail it, I mean, they're probably have a decent chance to kind of be a really funky stack in a large field tournament. How many people are going to play Buescher and Keselowski together? None. I just don't. I really.
And
how many people
and Priest go the whole RFK.
You know what? That's a one that we can get to here. I mean, the Priest is 11th, so it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I do want to get to the cheapies now though, because it is 11:48. We have a lot of cheapies. All right, I'm going to go ahead and rattle off the top names, and then you can talk about any names I don't mention, or talk about the names I do, obviously too. But Stenhouse 34th, Bragson 36th, Zane Smith 30th. All right, those are I think your top 3 in this range, right? If you wanted to kind of get funky after that, right? If you wanted to kind of pump up the jam, is Eric Jones pumping up the jam? 27. I don't. That's such a mediocre play to me. Maybe it's fine. I mean, maybe he's a great driver at Dover and stuff. I don't really love playing a 25% owned Eric Jones. We'll get to that in a second. Nemechek has had like a little bit of pace. Has that just been a good slew of tracks for him, or is that a sign of things to come? And then lastly, it would be Riley Herbst for me. And that's just because if you punted, is he your best punt? And I'm just going to mention it too, because every freaking time he pops up, Ty Dillon. All right, Stats, who's your favorite in this range?
There's one guy you didn't mention sub 6,500 is Bubba Wallace as well.
I probably should have mentioned him. But I look at it this way. I don't have him higher projected than Gragson, than Stenhouse, than even Zane Smith. And like the 8th starting spot at when I was looking at his like Dover results and stuff, it's very mediocre at this track. Maybe you'll have a different take than that, but it's like I just look at it where this has been a guy where if you wanted to look at the 12th and 23, it's like, okay, maybe that makes sense. But he just is he a top 20? He has to get into the top 15. That's the reality of it. Do you think he can get into the top 15 here?
Oh, I mean, I definitely think he could be top 15. His average finish at Dover and Next Gen is 16. So, certainly could be a top 15 car. You look, he's a very GPP guy typically. Yeah. I mean, he's kind of hit or miss. It hasn't had great success at Kansas either. I'm not necessarily saying he's a favorite play of mine, but I do think he's worth having a look at. If you look at on steep tracks, he's actually got a fantastic driver rating, certainly the best driver rating of any car remotely in this range. It just has not been as good at Dover in the Next Gen. So I think you can make a case certainly for Bubba. I think the best play down here for me is going to be Stenhouse. Stenhouse has been very good in Next Gen at Dover. One of the top driver ratings here. I think he's got the 4th best driver rating, if you can believe that, in next gen.
I don't believe it. I don't accept the facts. I don't
You want to know what his average finish has been? I believe top. Nah, I guess it has not been top 10 because he did not finish the race last year, but he has a second place finish in 22 and a 15th in 23. So barring the looked like he wrecked out, finished 35th last year. Barring that, I think Stenhouse becomes one of the. I think he's the most popular play down sub 6,500. I think he gets the most ownership, and you can certainly make a case. If you're getting to the 30% plus, I know he starts 34th. I don't know how comfortable I'm going to be having like 40% Ricky Stenhouse. I think somewhere like 20-25%, I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. But I think he winds up being the highest owned here. And then with Gragson, because Gragson's starting 36th. Again, we're looking for cheap plays, or at least certainly the market is, as we talked about extensively. A lot of these higher price guys are going to be very high owned. So you got to look for good drivers down, starting as far back as possible. Gragson certainly fits there, starting 36th. And he's got the 6th place finish here last year. So I think a lot of people are going to look to that with Gragson. Decent finishes as well in Kansas with a top 10. 3 trips out ago, has a 14th and an 18th. So I think Gragson for me is I actually like Gragson a little bit more than I like Stenhouse. I think Stenhouse gets a little bit more ownership. I might want to flip it. I might want to get about 30% Gragson and 20 to 25% on Stenhouse. Maybe just get a little bit under the market there. But I think those are going to be your two top owned drivers, and probably the 2 best drivers, at least on paper here. I think Zane Smith looks pretty decent. Again, we don't have a lot of history with some of these drivers down here because, of course, they, a lot of them haven't been in the series all that long. So Zane Smith's only got a 24th. If we look at Kansas, he's got pretty good finishes at Kansas in the last 2, 16th and a 10th. So I think Zane Smith with the 30th starting position winds up being a pretty good play down here. Maybe probably my third favorite option. I think you mentioned Eric Jones as well. Take a look at Eric Jones. Has not been good on steep tracks, but pretty solid driver rating at Dover next gen. So again, a 27 start position, not a guy that you'd want to X out of your lineups. I think those are some of the strongest plays that we've got. With hey, look, if you look at Cole Custer's history here, now he hasn't raced the last 2 years here, but his worst finish here is 15th. Now we're going back a little bit of a way, but he hasn't run. When was the next gen? Was what, 22?
Yeah,
was the first year. Yeah, so that was his worst year, and he finished 15th. Before that, he had a couple of 10th places and an 11th place finish at Dover. So I think he's a sneaky play. 5,100 starts 29th. I think that's a play. Not going to get a ton of ownership. Worth a shot. He obviously likes the track and has had some pretty good history here. So he's probably my favorite play. When we get down to these bottom 5, 6 drivers salary wise.
So no, like Riley Herbst for you. Then.
Yeah, no. I'm not Xing him out. Not Xing Herbst out. I think. Quite frankly, I don't think I'm going to. I don't know if I'm going to maybe a Yelly, but I don't know if I'm going to X out any of these guys at the bottom outside of maybe.
I don't think you can. And
Ty Dillon you can because of the starting position. The guy starting in the 20, like
you would X out top 20 machine Ty Dillon. How dare you, Stat? He's a top 20 machine. Like, come on now. You can't X out the one guy who has finished in the top 20.
I know he has. But I think I think 21st is that's a little too high for me. But I think all these guys starting, Cole Custer 29th. I think the guys starting 20th, like Haley, Gillen 24th, the other Dillon 23rd. I think those are going to be a little tougher for me to get on. But I might just want to get on board some of the, or at least get ownership to fit in on those lineups that I'm going to be taking some of these higher salaried guys. And so I think Herbst, Ware, and Yelly, they'll make that lineup for me. or they'll make my 150 builds at least.
All right, let's play a game here real quick. All right, we got 4 minutes. How much salary can you leave today? And before you say you don't like to leave a lot of salary, does that get affected by a really bad mid-range? And I want to ask that because I imagine others might have the same question. To me, it kind of does. And the reason why I say that is like, if I were to like leave myself at like 49.4, like I like to do, I like 49.4s, just leaving 600 is the most I like to feel comfortable with. And I'm like, if I'm in a 1v1 and like, if I leave 700 today, like, okay, that's Bowman to Chastain, or that's Bowman, but it's not quite down to host for. I think my min salary today might be in the 48s today stats, and 40 would be a high 48. But like, and the reason for that is I think there's a lot of great plays where if you were leaving like 1,200 in salary, like that's more than fine, and not because you're not getting an elite play, but it's like all these elite plays are kind of cheap, and if you do like have a higher min salary, maybe that forces you on the mid range, which I don't feel completely comfortable with today. I don't know if you have a different take there.
I'm actually going to be leaving more salary than I typically do. So I'm with you on this. And the primary reason for me is what I was talking about before, with maybe wanting to get a little bit different because we've got so many unknowns here. So I think leaving a little bit more salary, again, we're pretty much talking about the 150 max, but you could certainly in the 20 max have a couple of those, leaving at least maybe 1,000 on the table. I think because of the unknowns and the question marks that we have, this just could be a race where we're like, it got crazy. This race was a little wide. Certainly wasn't chalky. And, it just goes differently than we necessarily expect. So this is one of those races I'm going to leave a little bit more salary, hoping that it kind of mixes up my lineups where I won't, because I think actually the opposite is what the market's going to do, because I think the market's looking at the most expensive drivers here, and then they're trying to fit in whatever they can on the cheap side. So I think you're going to see a lot of if this lineup if the race here goes, if we get 3 10K plus drivers in the winner, there's going to be a lot of people on that same type of lineup, and those aren't going to be lineups that necessarily leave a lot of salary.
Yeah.
So I think if it goes the other way, I think if you leave some salary, I know people mock us when we say it, but we kind of want to. You're hoping you can ship these things and scoop it, maybe only split it 2 ways. I know everyone would be, and I would as well. I'd be happy to chop it 10 ways, but I think this does differentiate yourself a little bit, leave a little bit of salary today. And if this race is, goes in an unexpected direction, I think it gives you a little bit better or higher likelihood maybe of cashing in and even hitting it solo.
I agree completely. Driver of the day stats. It's that time. It is almost noon. Under 20%. If I brought it up, I think you would be shocked by how little owned some of these guys are projected to be.
Yeah, I actually brought it up. I've got mine, and I'm gonna just go with Alex Bowman.
Oh, I like it. Just a clean, easy, crisp Alex Bowman.
Yeah,
you already talked about him earlier, but great at this track. Certain in a range where kind of uncomfortable, and if you did end up in that range, you're fine making that click. You're not making a grimacing face like I would. I like it. Stats. All right, mine. I think I'm gonna go. I don't know if you quite. Yeah, I don't think he'll get to 20% here, but I really like Zane Smith as well. I think Zane Smith's going to be a guy where he'll kind of get slightly overlooked compared to Gregson, compared to, you make the case for Bubba, Eric Jones, Gregson, Stenhouse, right? Like Zane Smith, I think he has been racing pretty good over the last 2 months. And I just look at, where his form is at, what he has done. Like we saw a very strong streak of results there in the middle of the season, kind of earlier, before we kind of got into these road courses where they haven't been particularly kind to him, right? Like 35th at Mexico City, 27th at Sonoma, 14th at Chicago, but then like 7th at Atlanta. You also go back Michigan, 7th there. It's not like those tracks are very comparable, but it's like also just shows that the car does have the ability to get into the top 10. Zane Smith has been very good too. I think he's kind of gotten into the groove as a Cup driver. I really like Zane Smith to get the job done today at a very cheap tag. Alex Bowman is stats' driver of the day. Mine is Zane Smith. We appreciate y'all for watching. We hope that if we do chop it up top, we are holding hands. Should be a good time ahead of us. Have fun watching the race at Dover. 4 stats and 4i. Have a great rest of y'all's day. Bye-bye.